Turn is the 7. Doug Polk checks. And Negreanu has the nuts. He's counting the money. They are playing very deep stack. There's 230 big blinds remaining to get into this 9 big blind pot. You think it's possible? Hello everyone, I'm Jonathan Little for PokerCoaching.com, and today we have a hand from the 200-400 heads-up feud between Doug Polk and Daniel Negreanu. They are in the middle levels of this feud, and the action is fast and furious. So far, Negreanu's down a pretty decent amount.
Okay, hold on, let me bet this turn.
But he got a little bit back on this hand. Let's take a look. He raises it up with the 10-8 of spades, perfectly fine and standard. Doug Polk calls. Queen of spades, 8 of hearts, perfectly fine and standard. It's always nice when you're dominating your opponent right off the bat. Flop comes Jack, 8, 5, giving both players a straight draw. Daniel Negreanu has an open-ended straight draw. Doug Polk has a gut shot. Doug Polk's going to check every time here, and this is a spot where it seems like Negreanu has been using a 40% pot bet across the board, put two, kind of medium to high cards on the board that's kind of connected. He seems to be going 40% pot very, very frequently. And assuming that's the bet size he opts to use in this scenario, we see the solver opts to bet pretty frequently, right? And this is usually what the solver does. It bets with most of your best made hands, most of your draws, and then it checks a lot of hands that have a little bit of showdown value, but don't necessarily want to put a lot of money in the pot, and also a whole lot of junk. So we see like ace-king offsuit checking, right? That's a hand where if it checks down, it's probably the best hand. Let's take a look at a random 5. Notice some 5s are opting to check a little bit at a time, right? See 10-5 checking sometimes, 6-5 checking sometimes. You see all these offsuit 5s checking a lot of the time. I imagine the 9s are probably all betting. Let's see. Yeah, so the 9s are mostly betting, right? And jacks are obviously mostly betting. So the hands that are usually checking here are going to be some ace highs and king highs, it seems. Notice ace highs doing some checking, king highs doing some checking. And then just some total junk, like 7-2 suited, right? 7-2 suited has like basically no equity here, so it just gives up some chunk of the time. Also under pairs, 4s, 3s, and 2s check, because if you bet those and get called or raised, it's not great, right? But if it checks down, they probably win. You're going to find this is what the solver does the vast majority of the time in scenarios like this. You bet pretty frequently, but there are some hands that do opt to check. All right, over to Doug Polk. I think he has two options here. He can either check call or check raise. If he was facing a bigger bet size and he thought that bet size was coming with that same 75% range, he should be a little bit more inclined to raise than if he's facing a smaller bet. Because when he's facing a small bet, he's just getting really, really good odds to continue, right? So he does elect to call, and if we take a look at the solver, Queen 8 offsuit does elect to call the vast majority of the time, which makes sense, right? It has an overcard, has a gut shot. It's a perfectly fine hand. Let's take a look at the hands that do opt to raise, because that's always interesting to see. We see Jack 9 for 2 pair, 10-8 for open-ended straight draw. That both makes sense. We see some weaker draws, like 10-7 raising sometimes. We see Queen 10 raising a lot. We see 8-7, 8-6, and 7-6 raising every once in a while, so that's neat to see. Then we see some top pairs and some middle pairs, right? Like ace-9, king-jack, queen-jack, which makes a lot of sense. These are just very good hands. And then we see some sporadic total bluffs with like queen-2 suited. Kind of bizarre. I have to imagine this is with a backdoor flush draw. Same thing with ace-2 suited, king-2 suited. These are hands that people very often miss, myself included. Most people know to check raise. They're good top pairs. They're good middle pairs. They're obvious draws. But then they miss these like sporadic random bluffs. And you want to make sure you always have some semi-sporadic random bluffs. That said, notice the bluffs that are bluffing have an overcard and presumably a backdoor flush draw, which does give them a little bit of equity. Usually you're not going for just like total stone bluffs. Like notice 7-4 backdoor flush draw folds, right? So literally every draw here that raises has some kind of overcard or backdoor flush draw. And that makes sense, right? You don't want to check raise with just a stone airball. Anyway, Doug Polk calls this time. Turn is the 7. Doug Polk checks. And Negreanu has the nuts. He's counting the money. They are playing very deep stack. There's 230 big blinds remaining to get into this 9 big blind pot. You think it's possible? So this is a situation where you definitely want to be betting big, and that is what Negreanu does. He pulls out the full pot size bet, and I actually gave the solver all sorts of options here. And it seems like the pot size bet is by far the preferred option. I also gave it an all-in option, which it never uses. So in this scenario, on this turn, that actually does connect with Doug Polk's range kind of well. When Negreanu bets, he wants to be extremely polarized. He wants to be betting his best hands, which is going to be mostly his like good jacks and better. So we see like Jack 8 and better mostly betting. Interesting to see King Jack and Queen Jack not betting. You're going to find that in general, when your top pair has a gut shot straight draw with it, those hands are heavily favored. I actually learned this a lot while I was working on my tournament masterclass at pokercoaching.com. You see these patterns over and over again where you see like top pair with a gut shot and middle pair with a gut shot often betting in some scenarios. I'm like, oh, that hand is clearly viewed as a better bet by the solver than a hand like top pair with no backdoor draw or no gut shot draw, right? So that's pretty cool. But we do see mostly just the good hands are betting, right? Good jacks and better are doing a lot of betting. And then you're going to see a lot of gut shots betting. Like we see ace 10 for a gut shot betting, king 10 for the double gut shot betting, ace 8 for the gut shot, right? King 8 for the gut shot, queen 8 for the double gut shot, right? So you see all of those hands are opting to bet as well. We also see a whole lot of premium hands, right? Like sets and whatnot. Let's try to find some complete garbage bluffs again. Notice ace 2 offsuit and king 2 offsuit and ace 2 suited, king 2 suited, queen 2 suited also bet a large chunk of the time here. These are bluffs that I would probably never find. And, you know, going through this process of actively learning helps me improve my skills. I'm not doing this just for you. I know that you all are learning a lot, but I am too. If you're enjoying this, do me a favor, click the like and subscribe button below. That helps the YouTube overlords know that you like my work. So if you like it, click the like button and the subscribe button. And if you want to be notified whenever I have a new video coming out, make sure you click the notification bell too. All right, so this is a spot where when Negreanu bets, he wants to be betting big, he wants to be betting polarized, and that is what he does. So far, very, very solid play by Negreanu here. To be fair, you're going to find that usually the obvious nuts and the obvious draws are not all that difficult to play. The hard part is figuring out the really junky bluffs like we discussed, like the ace 2 offsuit here that I would probably literally never bluff. And then also the hands, like the marginal made hands. You have to know, like, should I bet most of the queen jacks or check most of the queen jacks here? It's tough to know. Anyway, he does go for the full pot size bet, and it's around to Doug Polk. What would you do in Doug Polk's shoes facing this pot size bet with a double gut shot straight draw in this scenario? What I want you to do is I want you to think about it. And then in the comment section below, write, what would you do? Would you, in this scenario, fold? Would you call? Would you raise small to, let's say, 8,000? Or would you raise big? Go ahead, pause the video, write it below. I'll wait on you. All right, did you do it? Good. Going through this active learning process is going to go a long way to helping you improve your skills. And I have proof of that because at my training site, pokercoaching.com, I have over 1,000 interactive quizzes where I ask you what you would do on every single betting round of a poker hand. Some of them are very standard spots. Some of them are a little bit more tricky. And then after every single betting round, either I or one of my coaches gives you immediate real-time feedback and you get graded on your choice. And if you find that, let's say you're consistently screwing up on the river, well, good. Then you know to go and study up on the river. We have many, many classes. So make sure you check out the quizzes at pokercoaching.com. They are an immense resource that will help you improve your skills. And you can get a free trial membership to Poker Coaching at pokercoaching.com/free. So whenever you're done with this video, head right over there and check it out. All right, this is a spot where Doug Polk is going to want to proceed by calling mostly because Negreanu's range to pot the turn should be quite strong and polarized, right? That said, when we're playing very deep stack, Doug Polk does still want to raise with some of his best hands and his draws. And this draw is actually quite strong because it blocks the nuts, even though we see Negreanu has the nuts this time. And he also has a draw to the effective nuts, right? Like notice if a 10 comes, he has queen 8, which gives him 8, 9, 10, jack, queen. That beats the 8s that your opponent could have. That would make a worse straight. So this is a spot where Doug Polk actually has a pretty good hand. Let's see what the solver does recommend. I'm not even sure what it'll say here. Doug Polk's turn strategy. Queen 8 opts to either fold. I'm surprised to see it fold ever, but it does fold about half the time. And then it raises, either using a giant bet or a medium bet. So this is one of these interesting spots where you can kind of do whatever you want. It's just important to make sure you're doing it at the optimal frequencies. I would venture to say that probably most people bet this turn card too often in Negreanu's shoes. I mean, like right here, if you give Negreanu Queen Jack, you think he's really checking it back? Or do you think most people are checking it back? They're probably not, right? If you give him like Ace 9, a lot of people just blast a hand like Ace 9 because they think, well, it's the best hand most of the time and I want to protect my hand. But you see, it's a clear check, right? So I do think this is probably a spot where people do bet a little bit too often. Notice you're only supposed to be betting, what is this, 37% of the time? So not all that often on this turn. So if people are betting too frequently, you definitely should respond by being a little bit more aggressive because their range is going to be a little bit too weak. Of course, if they're going to bet a wide range of bluffs and value hands, but then just call down a ton with all their value hands, maybe bluffing doesn't make a whole lot of sense. But it is kind of cool to see here that this double gut shot does not call, getting really good odds. I'm surprised to see that this deep stack does not stick around. But hey, like I said, we're learning together, right? Anyway, seems like a reasonable spot to raise. I would have raised here virtually every time. Typically, as a general rule, whenever you have a draw that lacks showdown value but has a lot of equity, and you're not really getting good pot odds to call, raising is often a very viable strategy. And Doug Polk does pull out the gigantic bluff, which is quite sweet. I like it. I like the play a lot. Notice this applies immense pressure to Negreanu's range. And if he even does have a hand like Queen Jack, this is so nasty. I mean, look, you're not going to fold. It sucks, but I mean, you're going to call down with the Queen Jack type hands. But if he has a weaker hand than that, this is certainly a rough scenario where you got to fold out a lot of your hands. Of course, Negreanu's not going to fold the nuts. The question is, does he want to re-raise? And the answer is probably, oh, no. Something else you'll learn from studying with the solver is that when your opponent takes a polarized line, meaning they either have a really good hand or a really bad hand, you do not want to raise with much of anything. And to be fair, look at this, right? This is Doug Polk's turn strategy. When Negreanu takes that polarized betting line, notice Doug Polk's only supposed to raise here like 7% of the time. Not very often. 7% is almost none. And whenever Negreanu gets raised in this scenario, we gave him the options of all in, call, or fold. Solver opts to call or fold virtually every time. It essentially never re-raises in this scenario because Doug Polk's range to check raise gigantic should be very, very polarized. Against polarized ranges, you want to call, and in this scenario, you want to call with your nuts as well. Let's take a look at the hands that do opt to call, just to show you some fun ones that call. Queen 10 for the open-ended straight draw calls. King 10 for the double gut shot calls. Okay. That's just because you're in position and you can probably get another bet in on the river. King Queen for the gut shot and overcards even calls some portion of the time. Queen 8 calls some portion of the time. Top pairs are not really folding all that much, but we do actually see the ones without backdoor equity folding, which is kind of surprising to see, right? Remember how I said that sometimes the pairs with draws are a little bit better than the ones without. Like right here, we see Ace Jack always folding to this gigantic raise, whereas like Jack 10 continues sometimes, and Jack 8 continues every time because it has the additional equity, right? So that's kind of cool to see. Obviously, two pairs are not folding. Notice Pocket 8s continues as well because it has the draw. Pocket 10s continues as well because it has the draw. So pretty cool stuff, right? Most people in this scenario, I think, literally never fold out any top pair here, playing heads up, especially against a loose, aggressive player like Doug Polk, and that may be the best strategy. You may say, why in the world would Pocket Aces fold? And most likely in this scenario, well, whenever Doug Polk does take this polarized line, you'll see that his value range that he's raising with are straights, some top pairs, and a lot of draws, right? And sets. And in this scenario, your made hand doesn't really matter all that much because you're beating all the bluffs with all of your made hands. So you really just want to be like blocking his nut hands, which are a whole lot of hands containing an 8, right? 10-8 and 8-6 are hands containing containing the nuts. And if we look at Negreanu's continuing range here, a lot of the hands containing an 8 continue, like 9-8 continues, right? And 8s and 6s, right? So yeah, we see there aren't really a ton of hands with 6s in Negreanu's range to begin with. But we do see a lot of the 8s sticking around and hands with 10s sticking around. And without those cards, you do a whole lot of folding. That said, no way in the world is anybody folding pocket aces in this scenario in the actual game. And that's them making mistakes, right? Of course, if Polk's going to be over bluffing in this spot, don't fold your aces. Yeah, maybe we should do this one day. But you'd be interested to see how much wider you should call if your opponent is over bluffing even a little bit. And the answer is you should be calling a lot wider. Anyway, Negreanu calls here as he should. He should not re-raise. Good, just call. Rivers to 2. Over to Doug Polk. Playing 1.7 or something like that pot size bets remaining. Doug Polk's river strategy is to either go all in or bet using a large 67 or 65% pot size bet the majority of the time. This is a spot where, again, he's very, very polarized, right? When he's very, very polarized, he wants to be going big with his best hands and his bluffs. We see 10-8 betting big the vast majority of the time. Sometimes it checks. You may say, why would it check? It's checking looking to check raise. That helps you protect your checking range. Because when you have a hand like Jack 8 that really would love for it just to check down, because Jack 8 wins sometimes, if you check, and when you check, you always check fold, all your opponent has to do is bet and you lose, right? But if you check with some nut hands, they have to be a little bit more cautious. Same thing with a hand like pocket 8s, right? You don't really want to face a bet when you have pocket 8s. So that's why you do see some nut hands checking a little bit. But the bluffs that are being used, Queen 8, every single time is being bluffed. Pocket 8s, every once in a while, is being bluffed. And there really are no other bluffs that are being used. And it turns out the 8 is sort of the power card here because it blocks 10-8 and it blocks 8-6. So let's see if Doug Polk goes for it. He does. Doug Polk torches his money. And Daniel Negreanu, of course, makes the easy call. Let's take a look at how Negreanu should proceed in this spot. And it turns out he should really just be doing a whole lot of folding unless he has a straight. That's about it. Goodness gracious. Could you imagine taking a line such that your opponent's supposed to mainly only continue with a straight? Obviously, he has a smattering of calls here with like pocket 9s for a set, but he's still supposed to fold a lot of the time. Pocket 7s for a set, but still supposed to fold a lot of the time. Interesting to see pocket 10s when he has it actually calls every time. I suppose, again, because you want to block the nuts, right? Notice pocket 8s calls some portion of the time, too, because you want to block the 8-6 and 10-8. But a whole lot of folding for Negreanu. And it turns out when your opponent is absolutely blasting it for many, many times a pot, over and over and over and over and over again, you have to be disciplined and get out of the way. But this time, Negreanu does make the call, of course, because he has the nuts, and a solid pot gets shipped his direction. That's going to be it for today. I have been learning a lot watching Doug Polk run these bluffs. I realize some of them do not succeed like this one today, but this is a spot where a lot of people do not go for it, and that results in them losing lots and lots and lots of small bits of equity on average. So yeah, fun spot. Make sure you are not playing weak and tight and nitty and not getting out of line, because if you do that, you may just be left with your sausage in your hand. Have a great, great day. Make good use of your time. Enjoy yourselves, and I'll talk to you next time. Bye-bye. Thanks for taking the time to watch this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you want more strategy lessons, pre-flop charts, and interactive quizzes, make sure you get your free membership to pokercoaching.com right now at pokercoaching.com/free. I'll talk to you next time.